I think it's fair to say that most people go into journalism not because they're cynical, hard-bitten smart Alex, but rather because they want to change the world. They want a front row seat on history. They want to contribute to a more informed citizenry. So it's always somewhat of a surprise when we see people quit journalism to, of all things, run for office. Why would they do that? We'll find out tonight as we meet 6 candidates who gave up on journalism so they could knock on 30,000 doors and lose their voices. From writing the first draft of history to making history. That's tonight on The Agenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is presented by Ontario's 33,000 chartered accountants, public policy leaders since 1879. More information is available at casforchange.ca. And by contributions to TVO by viewers like you. Thank you.
Joining us now on the debate in alphabetical order, Andrea Mandel-Campbell, PC candidate in Don Valley West. Indira Naidu-Harris, the Liberal candidate in Halton. Carleen Nation, the PC candidate in York West. Courtney Pasternak, the Liberal candidate in Parkdale High Park. Josh Rackless, the Green candidate in Eglinton Lawrence. And Donna Skelly, the PC candidate in Ancaster, Dundas, Flamborough, Westdale. I'm out of breath just saying the name of your riding. Thank you, everybody, for coming in today for this discussion.
We're happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here. Yes, we do allow men on the show, just to let you know.
I'm the token man.
You are the token man, it's Barin. I want just to go around the table quickly, and let's do it in alphabetical order again, to find out sort of the last thing you were doing in journalism, and then we'll get into some discussion about why you would leave such a wonderful, august, important, wonderful thing to do for what you're doing now. So, okay, Andrea.
Yes, the last thing I was doing, I was anchoring a show on CTV's Business News Network, show that looked at macroeconomic policy, government policy, and global competitiveness.
BNN.
BNN, yes.
That was you. Okay. Indira.
Well, a couple of things actually, working at CTV Newsnet as an anchor, national anchor, but also was able to do some guest hosting at CBC Radio. So guest hosting Cross Country Checkup and The Current. And yeah, so those were some of the things that I was doing, and lots of fun. And
I remember when you worked here.
I worked here too.
You did a show here many moons ago.
Resume. Yes, yes.
Carleen.
Yes, I've been with CTV since 1993. For the past 12 years, I've worked as CTV's diversity producer. I believe I'm the first person to be appointed to that position in any newsroom in the country. I worked with our producers nationally, locally, to increase the representation of diverse faces in our local and national news programs, and worked to bring communities into our news organizations, editorial board meetings, etc. Also reported on the CTV Toronto local newscast on the weekends.
Courtney.
So the last place I was working was Global Television here in Toronto, more part-time in the last few years since having my children, before that full-time. But I've worked with Global and CTV stations, A channels, from everywhere from New Brunswick to Saskatchewan and every province in between.
I'm sensing that CTV is the breeding ground for future candidates in journalism. We've all got that connection.
Global television was very good to me.
I had a long history at the CBC. So CBC News World, National Radio, CBC News World International.
You've got a hint of public broadcasting.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Josh.
Well, my day job, I'm a copywriter, so I write commercials. But like you said in your opening about changing the world, I've been trying to do that on the side in various sort of journalistic endeavors. I hosted 4 years of community cable shows on Rogers. I did some hosting on News Talk 1010 CFRB on the radio. I've done some appearances on CBC Radio, wrote some columns for the Ottawa Citizen, and most recently I've started doing iReports for CNN on their website.
I was going to ask you about that. What is that?
Well, I just discovered it recently. I guess they've got sort of a section of their site where people can submit their own news stories, just, you know, here I am in the hurricane or whatever. Mm-hmm. And if the producers particularly like your story and they think it's accurate, they'll vet it, which means they put a little CNN logo in the corner and they'll leave some comments about you, and they particularly liked my stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, go report on TIFF, do some stuff for us. So.
Do you get paid for that?
No.
That's the new journalism.
Exactly. Well, that's what they're doing right now. They've got free journalists working for them.
And that's frightening.
Same kind of thing. The Toronto Star has started a blog where they're getting bloggers to write their stories for them. They can still sell ad space and make money, but they don't have to pay anyone.
Same thing with Huffington Post.
Oh yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
HuffPo does that too.
But that's talking
Donna.
about the quality of journalism at that point.
Which is a topic for another day, I'm sure. But you mentioned public broadcasting. My very first job was at a community radio station called CSUPMF in Quebec, and it was so small, we didn't have a washroom. So you could, put a record on. It was the morning anchor or radio host, and I could put a record on and run home and use the washroom and come back and turn the next record on without any dead air. So that's how small it was. But the last 20 years I've been at CHCH, and part of that was co-hosting a show with Mark Hebscher the last 8 years, which was a pretty feisty current affairs show that ran every day.
What's he really like? Don't tell me. I know.
You do know, don't you? No, he's a great guy. I describe the relationship as a really bad marriage or a really good divorce. You can take your pick.
Okay, now that all of that is on the table, I'm going to start from the premise, as I suggested in the opening, that you all got into journalism once upon a time because of all of those things. You want to change the world, you want to make a difference, you want to have a front row seat in history and all of that, improve the public's understanding of how the world works. But you have all made the decision that somehow you couldn't do that anymore in journalism, or you'd done enough of that in journalism. And now it was time to try to do, presumably, all of those same things on the other side of the fence. So I want to find out why you all jumped the fence. Okay, Donna, why'd you jump the fence?
Well, I can tell you exactly the moment. I was on the air and I was talking about, and I don't, we're not going to get into partisan politics here, but it was the Samsung deal that pushed me over the edge. And I have young boys, and I was thinking about their future, and I was worried about their future. And for the past 8 years, I've had an opportunity to criticize and hold our stakeholders accountable. And that was the particular moment when I thought, rather than just challenging them, I would get involved in politics and try to make a difference myself.
Courtney.
I would say my story is not unlike Donna's. I mean, I always feel, and perhaps most of you will agree, that as a journalist, I've always felt like a public servant. Always, working to shed light on really important issues all across the country. And I'd say that, it's easier to sort of have a detached view before children. And really, things changed after having my first son 5 years ago. And to me, when I think of the issues and some of our public services that are at stake here when we're talking about a changing government, I just thought I can't sit back any longer. Again, it's one thing to report on them, and I've covered politics, I've covered Parliament Hill, I've covered Queen's Park, I covered this government's entry into office in 2003. And I've criticized this government too as a reporter, but I still think coming out the other end, they've done some really good things, and that it's my children's future at stake too, in terms of clean air, good education, good health care.
Carlene.
Me, I was so fed up and annoyed with the HST and the HST on hydro bills, because hydro bills have jumped 85%. I was annoyed with that and annoyed with the fact that the HST was slapped on everything, including real estate fees. When I sold my place and saw that they tacked on another $3,000 in HST.
Okay, but hang on, Carlene, you were a journalist for how many years?
Since 1993.
Okay, so you're a journalist for almost 20 years, and because they come up with the HST,
no.
you decided
The key thing is the debt. $50 billion worth of debt that we are now in here in Ontario. And Ontario, the economic engine of our great province, is now being referred to as a have-not
okay, but
province.
I'm missing something
It's a
here.
problem.
Where's the move from, it's not enough for me to report on this stuff that I'm seeing and not liking, I'm actually going to put my name on a ballot.
It was a confluence of all these things. I've been annoyed with the McGuinty Liberals for quite some time. And I just decided, you know what, this is the time to get out there and start talking about the issues, take a leave of absence, and get out there and start talking about it.
Indira.
Well, you know what, I agree with Courtney. There's definitely a certain amount of public service that enters into being a journalist. So there's certainly that in your mind. When you're going out and trying to find the stories of grassroots, you're talking to people on the street. What is on your mind? What do you care about? And then we as journalists take that and translate that into stories. And we try to be a voice for those people. And over the years, I interviewed tons of politicians and community leaders. Why aren't you doing this? What about this? Trying to direct people in certain directions. One day, I opened my eyes and I thought two things. I'm starting to feel like a critic, and yet I feel I know where the solutions lay. And secondly, I've interviewed everybody across, sitting like you have, Steve, on the other side of the table, talking to people, and I get a sense of who I think is sincere and who is going to be headed in certain directions. I am a parent, I am a mother, and I looked around my own hometown and my own region. Halton is one of the fastest growing regions in the country. It's changed, it's grown, and we have some very important things that need to get done. As a parent and as a reporter in those days, I remember teachers standing outside Queen's Park, basically, you know, on strike, and there were people dressed in riot gear pushing them back. I remember those things. I want my children in school. I don't want that happening again. I want the hospital in Halton and in Milton tripled in size, like the Liberals are promising. I want to make sure my children are in the classroom and getting top-notch scores so that they can compete later on.
Lots of stuff to follow up on.
Lots of things as a parent, yeah.
Josh.
I understood there would be no politics in this discussion. Didn't bring my notes. I guess to me, sort of running is an extension of what I've been trying to do for years in terms of, like, I'm very passionate about the environment. I'm also an actor and a comedian, so I was doing some of that on the side. And then I would do my radio hosting. But then it occurred to me I could combine my two passions rather than just asking idlers to stop and having them sort of threaten me. You know, I was like, well, can I make eco-comedy? So I'll do some stand-up comedy and some videos that are funny, but also about the environment to get the message out. And that sort of culminated, I did a love song for Elizabeth May during the federal election that I threw on YouTube, and that actually went viral. And speaking of CTV, they sent a limo and they had me in their studios for, like, you know, 3-minute interview. And I feel I had an effect on that election. Elizabeth May got in, I was very excited. And for this election, I'm like, well, what else can I do? How can I contribute even more? And I actually just made my Facebook status, enough of this crap, how do I run for MPP? Because I didn't really understand, and I got a call from the Green Party. Somebody was on my Facebook, it's like, are you serious? Would you run? And I'm like, yeah. And to be honest, you know, maybe I'd thought of it before, but I'd always thought, well, maybe I'm not smart enough, maybe I don't understand. But I gotta say, Rob Ford has showed me the way. I don't believe he really knows what he's doing at all. Nothing he does is sort of based on logic, or he just goes with his gut. And I think Margaret Atwood said the same thing. You know, I used to think I wasn't smart enough to run, but, you know, clearly that's not a barrier. So I thought, all right, you know what? Maybe I do know enough. Maybe I can actually make a difference as well. I mean,
And there you are.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrea.
Well, I'm your original causist. When I got out of journalism school, my dream was I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. I immediately took off. I went to Latin America for 10 years, and I wanted to write about poverty. I wanted to write about political oppression, because that's what was happening in Latin America at the time. And what I learned along the way was, in fact, because at that time, Latin America was going through huge changes in terms of these were countries that were opening up their economies. They were changing the way that they were managing. And what I found and what I learned by being there on the ground, talking to people living in you know, slum cities, for example, was the great equalizer was really how you manage your economic policy. That's what I learned after 10 years. So when I came back to Canada and I looked around and I said to myself, how are we really understanding this? And I ended up writing a book called Why Mexicans Don't Drink Molson, which is about how do we become an innovative, globally competitive country when we have businesses here that can create wealth, because at the end of the day, that's what creates wealth. I wrote this book, and afterwards I spent 2 years where I had government departments calling me, ministries calling me, including here in Ontario, saying, tell us what you think, let us pick your brain. I did that, and then nothing happens. And I said to myself, okay, there comes a day when you have to either, you know, put up or shut up. And I felt, okay.
The premise of your book, actually. They don't drink Molson because we're too timid in our business life.
Exactly. And I said, you know, I could write about this, or I could talk about it on TV on my show. And I was just so incredibly frustrated, because you can talk about it, but you can't affect that change.
But all of you at some point, no doubt, have stuck a microphone in a politician's face and heard the most inane, stupid, outrageously partisan, you know, dumb things. And now you're jumping into that world. And I'm trying to understand, Indira, you first, why, you know, we kind of ridicule them. And we do that from time to time when we sit around in our private moments and we ridicule some of the stuff that comes out of their mouths. And now you're joining that fraternity, or trying to anyway. You don't think about that?
Well, you know, Steve, I don't know if you remember, but you may remember, because we worked in the past, a little bit about my background. I was born in South Africa under apartheid. So my community, who I am, we had no voice. We didn't really have the vote. We could not vote. We weren't allowed in lots of places. And we came to this amazing country, to Canada, which gave us a vote and gave us a chance to really make something of our lives. And believe me, my parents gave up a lot for us to be here and be able to have that opportunity.
So you don't see politicians necessarily the same way?
I understand that the political world is an extremely important one, and it affects every single facet of our lives. So sure, you know, there were days when, as a journalist, I put a microphone in front of someone's face, asked them a question, and didn't feel that they really spoke from the heart. Hopefully, that is where, you know, us as journalists, that's where we are going to come from, and that's where we're going to make a bit of a difference. Yes, we know the issues, but we are also people who have been on the ground and have families. Okay. And so, you know, as we move forward, hopefully we can cross those bridges and do the public service,
Donna,
but
let me
also
get
get
you
the
on
job done.
I wanted to say, though, but I think that it's interesting because, and this isn't criticism, this is just an observation. When I left my role as a journalist and decided to run as a politician, all of a sudden you become the enemy. And you're treated differently, and I was really surprised that it didn't matter what I said. The media was looking for the angle, the scoop behind it. Well, what is she really saying? And I thought, I'm not doing this to ruin anybody's life. I mean, I'm doing this. It's not easy. You know, you're taking a leave. You're putting a lot on the line. I'm not trying to hurt somebody here. I'm trying to do something better. We may have differences of opinion in terms of what's best for the province or who we side with politically, but you become the enemy, and it's very interesting, and it's almost immediate.
Yeah, I would say it is discouraging, because I remember one of my biggest complaints as a journalist is, why don't they ever answer the question? Just answer the question, which is one of the reasons I wanted to run. Now that you're on the other side of the microphone, you realize they're not really asking questions, the real questions sometimes. And of course, I'm not talking about you, Steve, but I'm talking about other people who they're just asking, they're just trying to provoke a reaction, something incendiary, so that they can write about it, but they're actually not looking for the real news. And so you see that it's really just a cat and mouse game to a large extent.
But you've had a lot of ice time in this campaign. For whatever reason, the Conservatives have had you out there doing events with the leader, without the leader. Lots of media show up. Do you find stuff coming out of your mouth that is just kind of inane talking point stuff that as a journalist you never would have put up with?
There are times where I say, I went to university to do this. There's been a few examples, and one perfect example, I was doing a media avail where I was supposed to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that Dalton McGuinty is going to raise taxes. And what ended up happening was the first shot out of the gate by a journalist was, is Dalton McGuinty a liar? To which I had to answer, Dalton McGuinty's a liar. And then the next day, the story in the press is, it's getting so nasty out there because look at Andrea Mandel-Campbell calling Dalton McGuinty a liar. But the news is being created by the media.
Well, you didn't have to call him a liar.
No.
I could have said he was my best friend. The fact of the matter is, I do happen to think that he's hopelessly incompetent in terms of running economic policy. If he'd asked me that, I would have said yes.
Just tell us what you really think, okay? Get off the fence on that one.
Well,
Courtney, how about it?
Which part? I'm not sure what I'm responding to anymore.
The inane stuff that sometimes you've heard from politicians, do you find yourself now doing some of that on the hustings as well?
I'm finding that's why my communications director gets very frustrated with me, because as a reporter, yes, like Andrea, I got really frustrated with politicians never answering the questions, and I won't name a couple that drove me particularly bananas as a political
Go ahead,
reporter.
Name names.
No. Actually, what I loved about him is I actually found he was one of the most authentic politicians I've ever met. That's what I find. You know what? Well, it's all a matter of position. But you know what? I really believe that. And I found he was actually someone who would answer the questions, even if it wasn't the messaging that perhaps he should have given, and that he always put things into context. And one thing that I always hated about journalism in certain respects was that things were taken out of context. And like Andrew was saying, I've already noticed that's happened with me. And my desire to always put everything in context, which is what also turned me off even being a political journalist. I really couldn't bear it after a while. it drives people, like it drives my communications people batty, because they want me to just stick to a message, and I keep thinking, but wait, there's a bigger story here, and they're like, they don't care, they don't care, and I keep forgetting.
One of the things is we are also addressing local issues, and we talked about this before we came on the air, and that was people have specific issues that are close to their heart that isn't part of a platform, it's really not part of the campaign, but it's important to them. And to make any sort of promise or policy statement that is off script, I mean, you know, you can't. I mean, you realistically can't. So you are struggling as a journalist to answer the question without, you know, saying something that just could throw a campaign right
into it. Because when you're in journalism, I mean, for the most part, you get to say what you want in your pieces, right?
Absolutely.
So now you can't. Now you got to say what you're told to say.
Now you're stuck on policy, and
how do you deal with that?
That's it's actually, you know, what I find I do is I find a way to make whatever our policy statements are, and make it relevant to the people that I'm talking to. And that's relatively easy for me to do because I'm a pretty good communicator, I understand the issues, and I can make them understand the issues.
But I'm guessing
I've had though, on occasion, been very frustrated with the fact that I'm limited somewhat in stick to the policy, this is our statement, this is what we're going to do, and trying to translate that, make that real for people is sometimes a bit of a challenge.
You all know that if any of you get elected, that's only going to get worse.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely,
like caucus solidarity and
absolutely.
all of that, you cannot go
Absolutely.
freelancing, and if you do, you know, I think, I remember reading in Garth Turner's book, Sheeple, where he had a meeting with Stephen Harper, then the Prime Minister, who calls him into his office and says, you know, we got a problem here if you want to keep freelancing and blogging the way you do. And the problem with you journalists becoming politicians is you don't know how to lie. I mean, that was the thing. You have a hard time lying.
Is it lying or is it being responsible? Again, I want to go back to, you know, how can we possibly solve someone's problem, make a statement, make a commitment, make a promise that we don't know if we can keep? And I think that would be very irresponsible in many ways too, because you're just going after, it's the easy way, go after the
I find that people though now some people say to me, what are you gonna do for me to make this better? And what I say now to people is, you know what I can promise you is this. First of all, if any one politician promises you that they can change everything for you, they're lying to you. But what I can promise you is this, that I have some really good skills that I've developed over the years. One is a very good BS detector, which I hope all of us have, and I presume most of us have developed. The other one is that we can ask really tough questions, even to our own team. And I told the Liberals when I said I would run for them, that was who they were bringing on board, and they were good with that. And that I'm a really good listener, and not just pretending to listen, but that I really listen. And so I think those things, and it's interesting, I've had some really good comments back from people after saying that sort of thing, that those are the things I can promise, that I bring those things to the table, and that I promise to be a somewhat independent voice to a degree and have no problem pushing from the inside.
And that you will commit, essentially, to listening to them and to working hard for them, right? I mean, we can't talk about how things are going to play out, but we can say, I am committed to you, I will listen to what you have to say, and I will do my best to be a voice for you. But this, you know, I'm sorry, but I have to get back to the whole thing about the passionate feelings that we have about why we're running and why we're doing this. And I mean, when we talk about tough economic times, and I knock on doors, and people are saying to me they're worried about the future, I point out, we have already been through one recession, and we're doing okay as a province. And who do you want leading you? Someone who is a rookie, who has not been able to...
Okay, we're not going there. We're not going there. Hang on. We're trying to keep it Disney here, gang. Okay. Andrea.
I think for me, one of the things that's a bit disheartening, though, is to see the amount of apathy out there in terms of, you know, or cynicism, actually, would probably be a better word. You come to the door and they say to you, oh, you know, all politicians, I don't trust anybody anymore. And for me, I almost have a physical reaction to it, because here I am, I'm putting my entire personal life upside down. I have 2 young kids, like many people here do, and I really feel a genuine passion about contributing to this province and to this city. I wouldn't do it otherwise, because the hours are awful. You have people who everybody has something they need to talk to you about, and that is very concerning and important to them, and it is. So you're going out there and they say to me, you know, I've given up. And I say, I'm sorry, I can't give up. I've got kids, and I'm doing this because if we all give up, where does that leave us? And that's the tough part.
One of the biggest challenge for me within a certain section of my writing, we have a lot of young people, and quite a few of them are cynical about the whole process. And in fact, within a few of these neighborhoods, they've never seen my opponent. He's never been there. He's been there for what, 16 years. They've never seen him at all. And so they said, no, now you're just coming to talk to us. And so I say, you know, I'm here. I'm here to talk to you. I'm here to find out what issues are of importance to you because you have a voice. Now, I was in an area around Jane and Driftwood. They've never seen any of our other candidates. And they said the biggest challenge for one guy, he says, I've been here 26 years and I'm not going to vote for you. I'll only vote for Trudeau. I said, well, Don McGuinty is not Pierre Elliott Trudeau. You should be focused on the issues here, and you're doing yourself and your family a huge disservice if you don't vote. It means other people are determining what happens to you. So it's doing a bit of battling with some communities who've never seen the incumbent or any other politician competing in their area at all.
I try to be in my balanced journalistic self. I actually hear that a lot, that, you know, this person's never come to the door. Oh, you're just coming now. It's like, well, yes, I am just coming now. I've been a journalist. That's why I haven't been coming to your door. I'm sorry about that. And that we have to not mistaken visibility, which is sometimes what I hear, you know, that someone's very visible with actually getting real work done. And that's problematic. Just because someone makes themselves very visible, puts themselves on any show they possibly can, gets themselves into any press release they possibly can, shows up at the front of every parade, every protest, it doesn't mean they're actually getting things done. And I actually think that I would rather know my politician is working really hard in government or in their offices and trying to get, you know, solve problems that way.
Let me pick up on something you said there, and Donna, to you first on this. You said, you know, I haven't been knocking on your doors because I've been doing journalism. At what point do you stop thinking of yourself as a journalist, which you've been for many, many years, and start realizing, oh yeah, I'm a politician now, or trying to be one anyway?
When they started interviewing me and I realized they didn't like me. It was funny. I think you soon realize that if you've agreed to enter this political arena, you better realize that you're a politician now. And the journalists have a job to do as well. And respect that. I don't always agree, and I'm seeing something different now, having worked on both sides. But I think you have to do it right away because you have to. I mean, as I said, it would be really nice to be able to promise everything to everyone, but you can't do it.
Carlene mentioned that she's taking a leave of absence to go do this.
Yes, yeah.
But it's not really a leave of absence, is it? I mean, you can't go back, right? That's the difference between being a lawyer and going into politics, or a teacher and going into politics. Well, you're a journalist. You're supposed to have been neutral all these years. And now you're a Tory. Can you go back?
Well, my role at CTV was a bit different from a few of our panel members in that I wasn't covering politics.
No, but you're
actively.
presumed to be nonpartisan.
Yes. Definitely.
So can you go back?
I believe so, given the types of stories I was doing. Given the types of stories. I was covering stories in communities, issues, success stories, covering people's stories, basically, and doing feature stories on our weekend. Now, CTV was very clear. After my run, I ran for 4 weeks as a city politics. I never covered city politics after that. So they wouldn't put me if, certainly, I don't think about going back because I think about winning.
Okay, fair enough. But do you, I mean,
Good answer.
Do you have to just point out your party got 10% of the vote in your riding last time out? But okay, hang
bogus
on.
Poll,
we're moving
bogus,
on.
Bogus.
Do you think if I don't win, can I go back to being a reporter, or a journalist, or an anchor, or whatever?
Well, you know, after I wrote my book, it was very clear, you know, where I stood on a lot of issues and what I thought was what mattered and how you had to do things in order to get the outcomes that you wanted. So I've been very clear. I wrote that book. I went on to anchor a television show. So I don't see myself as limited. I think the question is, do I want to? And I think the frustration for me is, as I say, I want to get involved in actually being part of that change.
So
I
you're
want to be
gone.
the change agent.
Journalism
I
is
want
history
to.
for
I
you.
want to. I don't want to be on this side of the glass anymore. I want to be on the other side of the glass. And you know, it's funny. I do think of myself still as a journalist in many ways. My campaign manager has to remind me, "You're not a journalist anymore." But you know, you bring those skills. The other day, I was meeting with a family health team, and I kept asking questions. I don't care what the platforms are. Tell me what you think. And I think that's a value that you bring as a journalist because I want to know the truth. Because at the end of the day, you want to make it work.
And you know who to
Okay.
call, and you know how to get the answers. I mean,
But you had a show that was neutral, nonpartisan. That's the role you played. You were a nonpartisan anchor.
not really. I think I was allowed to have an opinion. In fact, I was told to have an opinion.
Partisan political opinion?
They wanted me to challenge and push back. In fact, there was a segment within the show where we would take a subject. Now, sometimes you had to take one for the team, but we would take a subject and have an opinion on it and argue, debate that particular
But I'm
issue
guessing you
or-
never, during the time you hosted that program, came out and said,
No.
I think Dalton McGuinty's terrible and I intend to
No,
do
but I
whatever I
would
can
say
to see him out.
I think Dalton McGuinty is terrible, or I think this is terrible, or I think that is terrible. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you go back now, though?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, I mean, just before I left, Pat Dillon and I got into quite a little argument on the air because of the Working Families campaign. And it was quite heated. And that was one of the reasons my job was so interesting, because I had the ability to challenge anybody. It didn't matter if it was Pat Dillon, Dalton McGuinty, Tim Hudak, or whomever.
I actually take issue with I take issue with the premise that we're objective, and having criticized media through my master's degree after practicing it for at that point it was about 12 years. I actually say that every journalist I know, every single one of them, is biased, has opinions, has very strong opinions.
Does
is
it show up in their
informed
work?
I would say that the good journalist who is, I agree with what you were saying. Not all journalists are put on the air to be completely objective. Some are put on with to have an opinion, and maybe it's more like a columnist at that point. But I think that a good journalist works very hard to be as fair as possible when you're out there, because of course we're informed. We're informed by our background, our socioeconomics, our religion, our whatever.
But you can't go back now. You could not go back to Global or CTV and say, I want to cover straight news again, or I want to cover politics.
I think it would be difficult. And when Carlene says, well, I was covering features that didn't matter, I say
I didn't say that didn't matter.
Well, it didn't have anything to do
but
with
I was saying
nonpartisan.
I didn't cover
But
politics.
I don't think you have to
didn't
cover politics.
politics.
I think actually it informs every decision that you make. Your background, your belief system, whatever they may be,
But the reality is you
informs
can't
every
go
decision.
back on the air as an anchor. I mean,
I
you
think-
can't. I mean, there are certain roles. There's one having an opinion.
Across the room.
Yeah,
And
you
then
can
there- exactly.
go back in that context,
Right.
but it is very hard. But I still say that you already have something, so you're just fighting against.
Josh,
Can
let me
I
ask
just
you.
jump
Let me
in
ask
here?
you, just stand by 1 sec. You're not constrained in the same way that some of these other former reporters or journalists are here, but you will always be seen, now that you put your name on a ballot, as a former would-be politician.
Yeah.
That's gonna, that will be with you for the rest of your days.
Yeah.
Do you worry about that?
No, I mean, to me, it reflects my values.